Ay, naku. Maliwanan tayo, tol. Hindi ko makuha yung mic ko. Tama na. Yo, what's up mga tol? Nandito tayo ngayon sa town hall. Nantay natin si Paren Dexter. Kasi meron tayong pupuntahan mamaya. Malalaman natin kasi surprise yan, tol. Eh, hintay ko pa. Mamaya-maya pa yung darating. Ay, may mga tourist, tol. Oh. Ay, ba't yan, ano? Kakainis naman tong lens ko. Wait lang, ha. Ayun, tol. Meron ako nakita nagkumpol-kumpol doon. Eh, wala naman tayong ginagawa. Sama tayo. Eh, susundan ko lang sila pero di-distansya tayo. Pero titignan ko kung ano yung ano. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung ginagawa nila pero nasunod sila doon sa isang lalaki. Sundan natin. Baka meron silang interesanting gagawin. Wala siyang magawa habang naghihintay kay Parang Dexter. Sunod lang tayo dito, tol. Baka mamigay ito ng pera, hindi hintay natin. Minsan kasi dito parang may mga tour. Hindi mo naman kailangan magbayad. Parang ano ka lang. Depende sa'yo magkano do-donate mo. Sunod lang tayo dito. Dami nila, oh. Hindi ko alam gagawin. Sama lang ako dito para may magawa tayo. Yung pala pila to ng yung mga mag-donate na mga organ. Hindi naman siguro. Sabay lang tayo para meron tayong gawin, may purpose tayo sa pagpunta dito. Ito yung sa gym station tol. Pero hindi nata-active yun. Active pa kaya? Hindi na siguro. Parang wala akong nakikita ang listahan yun. Saan tayo pupunta? Dami nila, oh. Manatili lang tayo ng distansya natin. Malalaman natin saan yung pupunta. Meron pa yata ito tol, St. James Station. Oo, parang meron pa. Meron pa nga active pa. Hindi ko pa nakikita yung station na yan. Kaya kami pupunta. Malalaman natin mamaya. Dami namin tulog. Hindi ko alam. Tanong ko rin. Excited na ako. Hindi ko alam kung saan kami pupunta. Pero sinusundan namin yung naka-verde. Baka yung iba nasunod lang din. Yun. Ito tinutur nga kami, tol. Tal, wala naman tayong magawa. Sunod na lang tayo dito para meron tayong pagkalibangan kahit paano. Hindi na ako makatiis. Gusto ko na silang tanongin kung saan kami pupunta. Ayun. Ay, hindi pala kasama to. Dito pala, tol. Ayan. Ano meron dito? Isyoso eh, no? Kasi zero talaga eh.
We had the first recorded instance of Australian soil on Game of Tricks. For many people, probably not that interesting. But for me, that makes it sacred ground, right? So there's a cricket ground in the middle, a racetrack around the outside. That's why this is still a big village in the old North Coast. And very different public uses over the years. Now a little bit of Sydney wildlife. These big white birds with the long black beaks. Alright, like the hotel chain players, group players. Local name though, Min Chicken. Not the nicest nickname, but you know, that's kind of where they eat, right? They can reach right down into the bins and tear them apart. They are definitely not endangered, they've got plenty to eat, don't worry. Now, got one other thing behind us here, we've got Archibald Memorial Fountain. Finished in 1932. The money came from a very eccentric Australian journalist and businessman, J.F. Archibald. He started a newspaper called The Bulletin And he was also obsessed with France. He walked around Sydney with a beret, with a crinkle moustache, changed his name from John Felton to Jean-Francois. It's basically a cartoon. He left money on his death for an art prize, a yearly portrait competition, which is starting in just a week or two, but also a fountain representing Australia's ties to the French, forged during the First World War, and specifically designed by a French sculptor as well. Very clear. So he uses some Greek mythological figures to represent the bombs of war, and one Roman figure. A little bit confused with their mythology. But another big landmark, St Mary's Catholic Cathedral. It's not the original building, that lasted 44 years until it burnt to the ground in 1865. We started this one in 1868. While we finished it, we built a little wooden one next to it just to use for the ceremonies. That one burnt down even faster. It was made of wood, right? Now, this one took a little bit of time to finish, making sure it was actually fireproof. So the town hall took 20 years, the QVB took 5. How long do you think it took to finish St Mary's Cathedral? 30 would be fairly reasonable, right? 40, we can keep going, multiplied by 3 in a bit. 130 years. Yeah, look, I said we were lazy, I wasn't lying. It was the year 2000, we had the Sydney Olympics coming along, we figured, ooh, there's probably going to be a lot of people in Sydney, we should probably finish all the projects we've got on the go. So we looked around the city, went, okay, it's pretty good, pretty good. Oh shit, the cathedral! We forgot to put the spires right on top. Part of the design, we just never got around to it until then. Look, it's not just us, Melbourne's state parliament is still missing the dome on top. So, it's just a bit of an Aussie thing to forget to finish your building. Now, it is lovely and finished and free to go wander through inside every day. There's a lot of Celtic influences in there as well, representing the strong Irish presence in the colony in the early years. A lot of political presence. Now, for the Aboriginal people of the area, this spot was a fertile hunting ground. There was a freshwater stream running right from the middle down to the harbour. And it was also where they settled arguments between the clans with a huge ceremonial sporting contest, kind of like a mini Olympics. If you want to learn more about the Aboriginal culture, there's a few museums you can head to. One is the Museum of Sydney, just down along Macquarie Street, close to the water. Really good specific Sydney history and our story, and stories about some specific Aboriginal people in the early relations. It's free as well. The other one though is the Australian Museum. So it's down that way outside the left of the park. It's a beautiful old building as well. That's a free natural history museum. And it's also got a great exhibition on the Aboriginal culture more in general across Australia. If you could only do one museum, I'd probably go with the Australian. But the Museum of Sydney is also very good. Now the Aboriginal people have been in Australia for at least 65,000 years. There are 250 nations across the country, 500 clans as well. They're the oldest continuing culture anywhere in the world, a huge variety of culture as well. There's the Eora Nation, 29 clans taking up most of coastal Sydney, very different to the inland Darug Nation, starting at about Parramatta in Sydney's west with 15 clans. Now the Eora language has been entirely lost. The Darug language is starting to be reconstructed, the grammar, things like that. They're working out some courses to start teaching it in some schools as well. But I'll come back to the Aboriginal people in a bit. First, we've got a very big time jump to 1770, when the first European explorer encounters the east coast of Australia. Sails by New Zealand and hits the east coast. Claims it for Britain. Declared that it was fine because it was terra nullius, land belonging to no one, empty or unused land. Well, obviously that was a big fat lie, right? There have been people here for tens of thousands of years carefully managing, maintaining and caring for the land. But the British didn't see any buildings or farms, so they thought they'd invade instead, do something a bit more useful in the land. They started in 1788 with the arrival of the first fleet of convicts. Now, why were the convicts sent out to Australia to start up a colony? Well, London's prisons in the 1770s and 80s were overflowing with prisoners. They needed somewhere to dump them all. They used to use North America. Then the American War of Independence happened. Not really an option anymore. They said, what about New South Wales? Perfect dumping ground. Giant new area of land. Now, the other reason to send the convicts out here was you're building a new colony on the other side of the world. geez, it would be handy to have some people to build it for you that you didn't have to pay. That's exactly what the convicts were, slave labour. And they built Sydney. Now the first fleet arrived during some pretty wild weather, lightning storms, hail storms. Very quickly though, it turned to drought, which happens a lot in Australia. And they still hadn't sorted out any permanent water storage. They were relying on that freshwater stream, which was already getting very polluted with a lot of dead pigs and just dead kids floating in it. By the early 1790s, luckily some more free settlers and farmers had started to arrive, and it started to rain a bit more consistently. They sorted out some water storage, and we were finally able to grow some food and become self-sufficient. So the colony slowly grew, with the population starting around 59% convict population. Leveled out to about 50-50 by 1800, slowly got down to 0% by the 1860s, because we stopped sending convicts out here in the 1840s. Now we needed a new source of immigration. Luckily in 1851, we found gold. It brought people and money flooding into the area, gave us a good Chinatown, the Central Station. But they found even more gold down in Victoria in the goldfields around Melbourne, which did make Melbourne for 30 years in the late 1800s the richest city in the entire world, which they will very happily remind us of from time to time, particularly if you've been to Melbourne and done the Melbourne tour. Anyone confirm that? You have no way of telling if I'm lying then. But look, Melbourne, fantastic city, great food, coffee, culture, sport, nightlife. They got a lot of things going for them. They're even bigger than Sydney again, if you draw the boundary a very specific way. Look, Melbourne, I would say, is just a little bit insecure. Okay? I think if they really believed that they were better than everyone else in Australia, they wouldn't have to keep saying it all the time. It just smacks a little bit of low self-esteem. The rivalry came to a head in 1901 when the colonies of Australia federated as a country. Well, a country needs a capital. Well, Sydney said it should be us, we were the oldest with all the heritage. Melbourne said, hang on, we're bigger than them and we're richer than them. Pretty good argument. So we looked at a map and we went, okay, Sydney, Melbourne, let's build a brand new city halfway between Canberra. That is how you pronounce it, Canberra. Ignore the E, pretend it's not there. 2 syllables, Canberra. Now, on a more serious note, back to the Aboriginal people, because what was happening while all this growth and expansion was going on in Australia? Well, we were growing and expanding into Aboriginal territory. So there was no treaty signed between clans and nations and the British government. So this led to the frontier wars in Australia. Diseases across the country, unfortunately. Even the common cold was deadly. Not brought intentionally by the British, but it did happen. There was also genocide in Tasmania and attempted cultural genocide across the country. This included government programs from 1869 until 1967, removing Aboriginal children from their families and raising them with white families or in missions to try and breed out the black ones. Now, unfortunately, that's not a story unique to Australia either. Here we refer to it as the stolen generations. We've done a lot of work since the 70s to try and help, but we've messed up most of those times. It feels like there's a bit of a change in the air nowadays though. There'll be a referendum after September on having an official First Nations voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution. And Victoria is also working on writing some treaties between some of its nations and the government. So the right moves are being made. Whether it translates into actual action and true reconciliation is another matter. But that does bring us to the modern day here in Sydney. We're a very peaceful, modern, multicultural city. 42% of Sydney-siders are actually born overseas, and about 2/3 of Sydney-siders have one parent born overseas. So we're very proud to be a big melting pot here, and to have had all of those different influences over the years. But we'll leave here, we'll head down Macquarie Street. I'll tell you all about the influence of one man, Governor Macquarie.
Angas tol, dami nating natutunan. Sunod pa tayo. Sabi. Stop ko muna ito. Kukunin ko lang yung mount ko. May uli.
Yeah, of course. He had a little bit of an ego. Also, anything old in Sydney or Tasmania is called Elizabeth. It's not named after one of the Queens Elizabeth, it's his wife Elizabeth. So, not But to do all of this building, you needed a good architect. Luckily, he had Francis Greenway, the first official colonial architect. Originally, the convict, sentenced to 14 years transportation for forging some financial documents. Luckily for us, much better architect than a forger. Some of his old buildings are still around us, including Hyde Park Barracks. Until that was finished in 1819, the convicts were free roam, because we're thinking it goes to the water, the bush. Either way, they'll get lost or bitten by something and die. Not a huge deal. By the 1810s, it was getting more crowded where they were living in the rocks, and they were starting to rob and kill each other in the streets. We thought that's enough of that, lock them up in the barracks overnight and keep them out of trouble. Nowadays, it's a fantastic free museum for the history of the building. And early colonial city is open 10 to 6 every day for free. Last entry is at 4:30 in the afternoon. There's another Francis Greenway building, just here, St James Church, the oldest surviving church in Sydney from 1824, but also for the first 50 or so years of its life, the tallest city in Sydney. The tallest. Look, fair enough, you can see the cross from down the water, so tall enough. But the current tallest structure is Sydney Tower. 309 metres to the very tip of the antenna. Great views over most of Sydney. You don't get a great view of Sydney Harbour Bridge and Sydney Opera House. There are a lot more skyscrapers in the way here. So just a heads up, alright? You can see to the Blue Mountains to the west and the north, central coast to the north though. And I'd say the view is still pretty good. But if you want to go up there, observation deck is $31 if you buy the ticket on the day, $25 if you book a Wednesday online. There's also a bar up there, bar 83. $30 minimum spend for the same views, and $30 per person as well. Basically the same price as a ticket, so you may as well go up there, enjoy the view, have a couple of drinks. Trust me, it won't take long to get to $30. Speak from experience, when the drink started about 14. Yeah. But there are some other spots with a better view of the harbour. I'll point them out when we get there. For now, we'll keep heading down Macquarie Street. I'll tell you about our rum spot.
Galing tol. Teka, kukunin ko yung mic ko para mas maintindihan natin. Kasi malapit na tayo sa kalsada. Kaya hindi makakapuklat ng maayos kasi napag-iiwanan tayo ng grupo natin. Ayos lang. Teka, mag-a-ahead ako para kunin ko yung mic. Ay, naku. Maliwanan tayo tol. Hindi ko makuha yung mic ko. Muna.